For today's lesson, we're going to be looking at what we call interest, compound interest. Now, we have heard of simple interest, right? Like if somebody borrows, let's say $50, and they said, well, pay me 10% on that one. At the end, we end up paying $55, right? $50 for the initial amount plus the interest. So we've talked about simple interest. Now, the world, and when I mean world, I'm talking about banks. So if you guys borrow money, like you have a credit card that's borrowing money, you go to the bank and ask for mortgage loan, like you borrow money, they're going to use what we call compound interest. Now, there are two types of compound interest. One that gets compounded a certain amount of times per year. So for example, here I have this one says compounded 12 times per year. Like I said, there's one interest amount that it gets compounded a certain amount of times per year. When you borrow from the bank, right, it gets compounded every month. You have to pay interest every month. Now, the formula we're going to use is going to be the amount. And the amount is basically the initial amount, which we call principal, the initial amount plus the interest. All right, so the amount is going to be principal, which is the money we start with. If I borrow money, that's how much money, that's my principal. That's how much money I start with. And I'm going to multiply that with, there's going to be a big parentheses. I'm going to do 1 plus. Now, the 1 is because I have to get the money that I borrow, right? I have to pay that money back. I have to pay it one time, which is, again, I have to pay that amount. Plus, I'm going to use R over N. Now, R is going to represent the rate. That's basically percentage, right? The percentage that I'm going to be using. And the N is the number of times it gets compounded in a year. Now my parenthesis is going to be raised to a powered. And I'm going to do N times T. N, again, is the number of times it gets compounded in a year. And T is how many years. Okay, so we have, think about a mortgage. Think about a loan, right? And then that gets compounded 12 times a year. Most loans are for 30 years. So you can ask your parents, all right, dad or mom, how much was this house to begin with? That's the principal. What's the interest rate that they gave you? That's the rate. And then it gets compounded 12 times a year for 30 years. You guys are going to figure out how much you pay. Now, I don't suggest that because you're going to see that you're going to pay a lot of interest. But let's use this formula. So here it says Amy invests 3,223. So that's the principal. In this case, she's going to invest money. So that's the money she start with, principal, in a savings account with a fixed annual interest rate of 8%. And this thing gets compounded 12 times per year. What will the account balance be after 4 years? Notice I circle all my numbers, right? I'm going to use them all. So I'm going to say the amount. For right now, it says A, the amount of money she will have. So what will be the account balance? That's basically what I'm trying to solve. Is going to be 3,223 times. Inside my parentheses, I have 1 plus. Now my rate is in percentage, 8%. I'm going to write it as a decimal. So I'm going to write that as 0.08 over. Now, 8%, whenever we go from a percent to a decimal, we have to move the decimal 2 places to the left. 8%, I see that as 8 point. 8%, 8 point, right? It's a whole number. Move the decimal 2 places to the left, and that's how I got the 0.08. Okay. And then my N, at the bottom of my fraction, let me put 12. The 12 is because it gets compounded 12 times per year. Now, this thing, my parentheses is going to go to an exponent. My exponent, I'm going to go 12 times 4. The n is how many times it gets compounded in a year. In this case, 12 times. And then the 4 because it's going to be for 4 years. All right. So let me work this out. The 3,223, to be honest, I'm not going to work on that just yet. Let me work the parentheses first. So I see 1 plus a fraction. A fraction is basically division. I learned my order operations, right? Either GEMS or PEMDAS, however you guys use it. I know I have to divide before I add. So I'm gonna go 0.08 divided by 12 plus 1. I did the fraction. I did the fraction first, so it's like 1.00 and then a bunch of sixes. And then that is going to be to the 48. 12 times 4, right? 12 times 4 is 48. All right. So this is what I'm going to do. On my calculator, because I typed it in, on my calculator, I have my parentheses. So I'm worried about my parentheses. So I have that. So like I said, I have a 1.00 and then a bunch of sixes. I'm going to multiply this to the 48. So I'm going to press the caret sign to the 48. So I'm going to do my parentheses to my exponent. And whatever I get, right, I'm going to press equal. Whatever I get, I'm going to multiply this by 3,223, which is my principal. So I get my parentheses to the 48. And then I'm going to multiply this times. So as a matter of fact, my point, let me do a little x. So times 3,223. Now this thing gives me 4,433 point. According to this, I have 771 and some more decimals. Right? It's a long number. Now here's the thing. Every time we're talking about money, we round it to 2 decimal places. So your answer should only contain 2 decimal places. My third decimal place is too small. In this case, it's a 1. When it is too small, I'm just going to ignore it. If it is big enough, now too small is 4 or less. 1 is too small. When it's big enough, 5 or more, just add a penny to the balance. So my answer here should be 4,433.77. So 4,433 with 77 cents. Wow, that's a great investment. She started with a little over 3,000 and she gained a little more than 1,000 in 4 years. In 4 years at an 8% interest. Not bad. Now let's take a look at number 40. Right? First thing I look is, does it get compounded a certain amount of times per year? And here it says compounded 4 times per year. Okay, so I pay attention to that. So I'm going to use my same formula here. My account, my amount, my principal says Andiva invests 4,604. So my principal is 4,604. Now inside my parentheses, I'm going to have 1 plus. Remember, I need to go rate over n. And rate is obviously the percentage. And n is how many times it gets compounded per year. So here in the savings account with a fixed annual interest of 8% compounded 4 times per year. So I have to go 0.08 divided by 4. And then I'm going to have an exponent. Remember, I go n times t. N is how many times a year. I know 4 times a year. Now t is how many years. So as a matter of fact, up here, I'm going to have 20. right? It gets compounded 4 times a year, and it's going to be for 5 years, so 4 times 5. That's basically what I got. So let me worry about my parentheses first. So 0.08, because I have to do division before I add, 0.08 divided by 4, and then plus 1. So I have 4,604, that's a principal, times 1.02 to the 20th. Now the 1.02, because that's 0.08 divided by 4 plus 1. And then to the 20. So, okay, so I have to do to the 20th times 4,604. I'm going to round it to 2 decimal places. So my answer should be 6,841.30. When we deal with money, we always run it to 2 decimal places. All right, let's do another example. Let's take a look at number 41. First of all, I want to see how many times it gets compounded in a year. And I see compounded 6 times per year. So I'm going to use the same formula I've been using. So JD invest 1,678. So the amount, what I'm solving for is 1,678. Inside my parentheses, I'm going to have 1 plus. Remember, I have to do a fraction. Rate divided by n. R divided by n. R is the rate. N is how many times it gets compounded per year. I see that the savings account with a fixed annual interest rate of 2%. So let me write my 2% as 0.02 over 6. The 6 is because it gets compounded 6 times per year. And then as an exponent, I know I have n times t. It gets compounded 6 times per year, and it's for 9 years. So 6 times per year for 9 years. That my exponent here is going to be 54. So work the parentheses. 0.02 divided by 6 plus 1. Remember, I have to do division before I add. So that's why I said 0.02 divided by 6 plus 1. Press equal. That gives you the decimal, which is like 1.00333333. Okay. Now press to the 54. So to the 54. So exponent. So to the 54. Press equal, and your result multiplied by 1,678. Round your answer to 2 decimal places. So I get, like I said, I typed this on my calculator, and I get $2,008 with 33 cents. Use the formula that I gave you. Principal times, inside parentheses, 1 plus R over N. R is the rate. N is how many times it gets compounded as a year. Now my parentheses goes to an exponent, N times T. N is how many times per year, and T is how many years. Now we're going to move into something that we call compounded continuously. So that basically the interest gets compounded, gets calculated every second, every millisecond. The interests are running continuously. Okay. Now for this one, we're going to use a different formula. Not too different, but we're going to use a different formula. I'm going to go A. The amount we're going to calculate is going to be the principal times E. There's a number called E. On your calculator, you should find E. It's about 2.7. Now this E, we use the number, we call it E after Euler. We spell Euler E-U-L-E-R. And we pronounce it Euler. Great mathematician. And I suggest you guys Google him, learn about him. So P times E, but now my E has an exponent. My exponent is going to be R times T. My R is the rate, and the T is the time. So now here, Carlos invests 6,135. So my amount in this case is going to be 6,135 times E. Again, E is a number. It's about 2.7. You should find it on your calculator. Okay, times E to the, now here, my E has an exponent. For my exponent, I'm going to calculate rate times time. If you notice, the rate is 8%. So I'm thinking of 0.08. My time is 13 years. So on your calculator, go 0.08 times 13. And I get 1.04. All I did was rate times time. All right, let me worry about my exponent first. So E to the 1.04. Like I said, you should find it. You might have to press Shift or Alt or green or second, depending on your calculator, but you want E to the 1.04. When you type that in, it's like 2.8292, right? Some numbers. And then times 6,135. Let me just emphasize, I did this first, E to the 1.04. I calculate that, and whatever I get, then I multiply with my principal. Remember, exponents come before multiplication. That's why I did the exponent first. Now, when I multiply this out, I get 17,357.25. Notice I'm rounding to 2 decimal places. My decimal was 0.246. That's what I call it 0.25 because I'm rounding to 2 decimal places. Okay, now let's take a look at number 43. So reminder of the formula I'm going to use. The amount is going to be principal times E to the RT. Okay, so my principal is 6,478. So the amount, what I'm solving for is 6,478 times E to the, I see is 2% for 8 years. So 0.02 times 8. That gives me 0.16 or 0.16. Now calculate your exponent first. So E to the 0.16, whatever you get, multiply it with 6,478 and round your answer to 2 decimal places. I suggest you guys type it on your calculator. And we're going to get $7,602 with 0 cents. In this case, when I got my decimal, my cents, it was basically 0. Because on my calculator, it came out as 0.003, right? 0.00, it's basically no cents, right? So 7,602. Now let's take a look at number 44. The amount, what I'm finding out is 4,526 times E to the, I see 7% for 14 years. I'm thinking 0.07 times 14. So I get 0.98. All right, do the exponent first. So E to the 0.98 times 4,526. And I'm going to get, round your answer to 2 decimal places, I'm going to get $12,059 with 33 cents. Highly recommend type this out on your calculator. Make sure you get the same stuff, and then you're good to do your homework.